Okay, monetary policy. Okay, similar to our fiscal policy, what we'll be doing for monetary policy is also going to be expansionary and contractionary monetary policy. Now, what is monetary policy? Monetary policy is the government using the money supply, manipulating the money supply so that it can either promote growth or to make the economy contract. Okay, or to make growth negative. Okay, so now that's monetary policy. Okay, so how does the government actually change the money supply? Okay, so let's say he wants to increase the money supply. So does the government just load like a helicopter of money filled with cash, and he flies around, and then he opens the hatch and all the money drops out, and we down there, we're gonna like be happy and we're gonna grab the money. Woo! Is that true? No, that's not going to happen. Okay, that is not how the government pumps money into the economy. Okay, so what the government does is that it prints money first. Okay, so the government prints money and it uses this money, okay, to buy bonds from the banks. Okay, the banks will give them back the bonds. Okay, and they're stuck with all this money, right? Okay, so now what happens to this money? This money will be kept in the bank's vault, and this actually increases the money supply in the economy. Okay, so that is how monetary policy works. Okay, so when we talk about the ISL model, okay, this is what's going to happen. Okay, just a reminder. Okay, this is the focus. Okay, the goods market, okay, and the liquid assets market are just for illustration purposes. You don't have to show this in the exam, okay, but this is a very good way on how you can understand what happens between moving from one point to another point in the ISM model, okay, and it is crucial for you to explain what happens. Okay, so now we know that money supply is going to increase. So when money supply increase, I'm going to move my supply curve to the right side over here. So I've got MS1 over P. Okay, so now this is how the thing moves. Okay, so we have moved from here to here, A to this point, because interest rates has not changed yet. Okay, so at this point, there will be an excess supply of money. So when there's an excess supply of money in the bank, okay, what happens is that the banks wants residents to actually withdraw the money. So how do they do that? They decrease interest rates. Okay, they decrease interest rates from R0 to R1. Okay, so by decreasing interest rates, the opportunity cost of putting money in the bank increases because they could get a high return outside, either through investment or by putting their money into bonds. Okay, so interest rates has dropped to R1. Okay, and we are at point B. Whoa. Okay, so now at this point, this is also point B. Okay, because income hasn't changed. We can't move anywhere else except here. Income is still at Y0. Okay, so with that, I know that my LM curve has to shift down. Okay, remember this is an exogenous change. That's why LM curve shifts down. Okay, from LM0 to LM1, and my money supply is P1 right now. Okay, so that's why these are my notations. Okay, so now we know that we got to get to this point. Okay, but how are we going to move there? Okay, so now as you can see, when R0 has dropped to R1, okay, what happens to my AE curve? Okay, my AE is going to move up. Okay, why? Because investments is increased, right? So move up to where? You move up to this point over here at the new output here. Alright, okay, so investment has increased. Okay, and we've got this. Just let me use another color. Okay, AE curve is going to increase upwards. Okay, so that is how monetary policy promotes growth. Okay, now we have a new point. Okay, we'll call it Y1, Y1. Okay, so we'll eventually go up to point C. Okay, so what happens at this point? At this point, okay, we're going to be moving along this LM curve. Why? Okay, because interest rates, okay, decrease, causing investments to increase, and income will increase. Once income increases, what happens to the demand for liquid assets? It increases as well, right? So increases to where? Increases to this part here. Okay, increases to this part over here. So I'm just gonna draw a line. so that I know where I can stick my new demand curve for liquid assets. It will be here. So I'm just going to draw a line down here like this, cutting through that point, and this is going to be point C, and this is going to be L bracket Y1. Okay, and interest rates again increase to R2. So this is R2, so that's why we have moved up along the LM curve. So as you can see, the change in interest rates is endogenous. That's why we move along the LM curve. And the change in interest rates, okay, is because there has been an increase in the demand for liquid assets. And same thing, okay, you talk about excess demand, excess supply. That's why you move to the new point C. Okay, now you may wonder, okay, so now interest rates has increased. Okay, so shouldn't something happen to investment? Yes, something should happen to investment. Investment would drop. Okay, but look at this AE curve over here. Okay, I have actually drawn the final AE curve. There was actually an initial one that would happen somewhere here, but I didn't bother because what is the main focal point? The main focal point is over here. Okay, our liquid assets market. Okay, so I'm going to throw away the focus on this side, and I'm going to focus on this side instead. So this is more important. Okay, so now our economy has successfully landed at point C. Okay, so now that was an expansionary monetary policy. As you can see, it was different from the fiscal policy, because in fiscal policy the interest rates remain unchanged, and because of the change in income, a whole lot of hoo-ha happens. Okay, but for monetary policy is different. Okay, monetary policy, interest rates change a lot initially. Okay, so just let me go through that again. Okay, I'll put it down in steps for you. Okay, now the first thing that happened, okay, was that money supply increased. Okay, so the money supply increased. Okay, and then it led to an excess supply of liquid assets. Okay, and then interest rates dropped. Okay, so when interest rates dropped, okay, so your LM is going to shift down. LM is going to shift down, okay, and it will be at point B. Okay, so the next thing that happens, because interest rates decreased, okay, investment is going to increase. Okay, so my AE increases. Okay, so my AE curve shifts up, and then output would increase. So when output increases, okay, the third thing that happens is that my demand for liquid assets is going to shift to the right. Okay, giving me new interest rates. Interest rates were increased. Okay, and that was how I landed at point C. Okay, now the movement in the IS curve is captured here. Okay, because of the increase in investment. Okay, that's it. Alright. Okay, now let's practice our skills. Okay, when it comes to contractionary fiscal policy. Monetary policy. Okay, so now first thing that happens, okay, is that what the government does, okay, is that the government sells the bonds to the banks. Okay, so government sells bonds to the banks, right, and the banks give them back money. So money has decreased. Okay, so what happens to my money supply curve is that it's going to shift to the left side. Over here. Okay, we'll call it MS1 over P. Okay, so now at this point over here, we have an excess demand for money. So when there's an excess demand for money, okay, that means people want to withdraw their money, okay, out of the banks. What the bank does to keep them from doing that is that they will increase their interest rates. Okay, so when they increase the interest rates, we move along the demand curve from point A to point B. Okay, and we have a new interest rates level. Okay, we'll call that point B. Interest rates has increased to R1. Okay, and we know that the LM curve is going to shift up to this point. Why this point? Why is this point B? Because income hasn't changed. So I'm going to draw a new LM curve. Call it LM1, M1, P0. Okay, alright, so now using a different color. Okay, now at this point B, okay, what happens to investment? Investment decreases, right? So investment decrease, it decreases to where? It decreases to here. Now in actual fact, does it decrease more than this? Yes. Okay, but because I'm gonna, like mentioned just now, I'm gonna draw the eventual AE curve, so that's why I'm just gonna ignore whether it increases more or less. I'm just gonna make sure that it lands exactly at this point over here, which is my point C. Okay, so now I know that this is gonna increase up here, decrease, so I'm gonna draw a new AE curve. Okay, and this is gonna be my new point. Let's call it Y1. Y1. Okay, so now income has dropped. So what happens to when incomes drop? The demand for liquid assets drop as well. Drops to where? At where point C is. Alright. So I have a new demand curve for liquid assets, which looks like this. Okay, it'd be great if you could use different colors because you don't confuse the old supply curve and the new supply curve. Okay, so now, since that this has dropped, okay, we are at a new point, point C. This is R2. Okay, now you don't really have to explain in detail the excess supply or excess demand thing. Okay, because initially when you talked about this excess demand for money, and that's why the interest rates change, it really goes to show that you have an understanding of what happens inside the liquid assets market when there is a change in money supply or demand. Okay, so now this is our new point R2, new interest rates, and there we are. So the economy has moved this way. Okay, right, leftwards along the IS curve because of the drop in investment, and that is an endogenous change. That's why it is a movement along the curve. Okay, and it has moved downwards along the LM curve because interest rates has changed due to a decrease in the demand for liquid assets. Okay, so now that is contractionary monetary policy. Now this is the most detailed explanation that I can give you. Okay, in your lectures it might probably take longer to explain this. Okay, because you can't repeat whatever the lecturer has said. You know, you can't rewind and press play again. But at Quick Economics you can do that. Okay, so what I suggest is you repeat this video and keep playing again and playing again and playing again. Sooner or later, you know, all these movements, okay, is gonna get into your head. Okay, how I did it was I actually kept practicing and practicing, kept writing and writing like short little essays on what exactly happens to the economy, and that's why they land at point C. Okay, remember, it is not good enough to say that, oh, the M curve has shifted up, so that's why the graph said so, I'm gonna move from A to C. Okay, you know, that will give you minimal marks. Okay, you have to be able to explain. Okay, so once you get all this in your mind, okay, it'll be easier for you to actually present all these answers out. Okay, now the next thing I want to go through is, let's say there is a change in the IS slope. Okay, so let's say that I have my IS-LM model right here. This is my IS, this is my LM. Now they say, okay, that the IS curve is going to be flatter. Okay, maybe after your calculations or whatsoever, you realize that the IS curve is going to be flatter, and so they ask you, how will your answer change if, let's say, your IS curve becomes flatter, or what is the implications? Okay, so I know that what I thought you guys was that, okay, we're gonna move outwards like that. IS curve becomes flatter. Yeah, IS curve has become flatter. It's correct. Because the y-intercept hasn't changed. You know, I did all my calculations, you know, and just let me show you what I mean. Yeah, over here. Okay, you asked me, but this is the only thing that has changed, right? This hasn't changed. Okay, so that's why I rotated along the y-axis. Okay, reasonable, right? Yes, you are correct. You are absolutely right. But in this context, when you're talking about comparing one IS curve to another IS curve, when they talk about monetary policy, okay, we want to see what is the effectiveness of the monetary policy. Okay, now I'm gonna propose that instead of this, we're gonna draw this instead. Along this point. the initial point. Okay, and you may think, hey, that's absurd. Okay, the y-intercept hasn't changed. Why should my IS curve rotate out and shift down? Why? Okay, now the reason is for comparison purposes. Okay, now let's say if I'm going to draw a new LM curve. Okay, there's an expansionary monetary policy, and this is my new LM curve. You see, now at this point, I can compare what happens here. So this is my initial point. I can compare what happens here and here, initial IS. This is the effect of the monetary policy, this much. And I can compare it to this, which the effect is this much. Okay, so in regards to this, I can actually tell you that, oh, you know what, with a flatter IS curve, my monetary policy will be more effective because my economy has achieved an output that is much more as compared to an IS curve that is flat. Okay, so now that's why I rotate my IS curve along this point. Now, if I would have done this, you know, it's not a very fair comparison. You know, yeah, this is my initial point, and I only got this. How do I compare it with like a steeper IS curve? So now that's the reason why we rotate it along that little pivot over here. Okay, now remember we were talking about the what you call that, the overcrowding effect. The crowding out effect. Okay, that is a limitation to fiscal policy. Okay, so what happens is that when there's crowding out, okay, this thing happens. Okay, so now we have our IS-LM model over here. Okay, that's IS and that's LM. Okay, we know that if there's an expansionary fiscal policy, so this happens, the IS curve is going to shift to the right. Okay, and we were supposed to be over here at y1, but then because of the overcrowding effect, we moved this way. We are at y2. Okay, interest rates are at r1, and the increase in interest rates actually caused this shit. Okay, so now how do we prevent a crowding out effect? Okay, now we can use this thing called a policy mix. So what the government can do is that the government can increase their spending as well as increase their money supply. Okay, so if I increase my money supply while increasing my spending, I'm going to have something like this. Okay, so now instead of this being my final point, this is going to become my final point. So as you can see, the crowding out effect has been eliminated. Okay, because I'm now at y1. Okay, and interest rates has remained unchanged. So when interest rates remain unchanged, investment doesn't change. So when investment doesn't change, there is no crowding out effect. Okay, so now that is called a policy mix, using monetary and fiscal policy, okay, to either expand or contract the economy. But what are the limitations of this? The limitation of this is that it's going to be very costly. Now the government has to increase their own spending. And has to print more money, okay, to put into the economy so that they can achieve this. Okay, you know, in countries like Singapore, you know, for every $1 that we print, we have to account it for a piece of gold. Okay, so it's really going to be very expensive for the economy, for the government. And the other limitation to this is that, okay, it is very difficult to coordinate both policies at the same time. Okay, because if both of them are not coordinated properly, okay, there might be some repercussions that we do not really want to see. Okay, so that will be further discussed, and you take macroeconomics in your second year, okay, which is is not a foundation unit. Okay, you got to pass intro to econs to get that. Okay, so now that was monetary policy for you. Okay, in the next few videos we'll be talking about this thing called the paradox of thrift. We'll be going on to the ADAS model, okay, and soon the open economy. Alright, thanks for watching.